Morning. All right, everyone. Gonna crack that whip. Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started here. Got a lot of text to cover this morning, so we'll get going. Good to see everybody. Good to be back. We've been back for several days, but weren't here last Sunday as we got some family time down in Alabama. And I know we had a lot of travelers with spring break time, so I'm sure we'll have more back today. Maybe some still traveling, but good to be back. As we get started here, I'm going to pass this around for our meal. We got our Wednesday meal coming up. If you plan to come to that, please sign up so we know how much food we need. Is there anything else announcement-wise we need to mention? All right, well, if not, open up your Bibles to Genesis 42 is where we're going to pick up this morning. Genesis 42. We've been working our way through this story of Genesis, and we've been working our way through the story of Joseph and his brothers and his family the last couple of weeks. So we're taking it in chunks. So, it's the last 13, 14 chapters of Genesis, but we are, taking this in 3 or 4 chapter chunks at a time. We've seen up to this point the story of Joseph, how he was this favored son who angered his brothers in that, and perhaps in some of his pride in that a little bit, but he's rejected by them. He's sold into slavery by them. He ends up down in Egypt. He faces trials there. God is with him through all this, and yet there's trials there. He blesses him. He rises to this high place in Potiphar's house, but then there's Potiphar's wife who makes advances on him. He flees, but he's accused. He ends up in prison, and then the same cycle. He's blessed there. He has responsibility in the prison. He interprets the dreams of some of Pharaoh's workers. And in that, one of them is restored. One of them ends up dying. He's supposed to speak to Pharaoh, but they don't initially. But eventually he remembers and speaks on Joseph's behalf. Joseph is able to interpret a dream for Pharaoh about this drought that's coming. And the danger of that and what needs to be done as it relates to that. Pharaoh is impressed. Joseph is brought into his house. He is below no one besides Pharaoh in Egypt. And he's going to oversee this project to sort of collect the grain in the good years, that there might be enough when the years of drought come. And so he oversees this. And that's where we're going to pick up in chapter 42, is where this is going to lead to the reintroduction of the brothers into Joseph's life. And it's just a really interesting section we're going to look at this morning as we pick up. There's a lot of brokenness that still needs mending as we pick up in chapter 42. I mean, things have gone well for Joseph. He's gone from slavery to prison now into this high place in Egypt, but he's still separated from his family, has been for probably about 20 years, it seems. Joseph's father has been mourning for those 20 years, the loss of his beloved son. And then, of course, his brothers have just been burying this, not bringing it to light, unrepentant for 20 years as it relates to this. And so we pick up with this morning. It's really a compelling section when we see them come back together. And I was really excited to teach this. Things were kind of up in the air for a bit and of how things might be rearranged because we missed a week, but I really wanted to teach this. It's a section of this story that I used to sort of wrestle with of what to make of sort of Joseph's motivations in some of this, but I've come to see it as a really interesting section where perhaps Joseph, but God especially, is going to offer a test here, and it's a really interesting opportunity for some redemption. And I think we love stories of redemption. And just to put us in the frame of mind of that, and I want to ask you to share specifically, because I know this could get into some personal things of our lives and maybe just disappointments, but have you ever had a redo in life where something went wrong, didn't go as you wanted, maybe you messed up, but you got an opportunity down the road, maybe not to fix that specific situation, but maybe to sort of walk through a similar path and a chance to do things a little better this time, a chance to a do-over. I think we long for those sometimes in life because there's many things where we do fall short, don't go as we like. I think that's kind of what we're going to see here. Things are going to play out in a similar way as they did before, and the brothers are going to have an opportunity through this, and Joseph's going to help bring that about. Chapter 42, let's start reading here. I'm going to stop a couple of times for comments, but we're going to have to keep a good pace to get through this, several chapters this morning, and then try to clean up at the end some of it and make some comments. But pick up in chapter 42. Here's how it's set up, verses 1 through 4. It says, when Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you look at one another? And he said, behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. To go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. So the famine has reached Jacob and his family. And so he says, there's grain in Egypt, let's go to get this. But then it's interesting what he does. He's going to send 10 of the brothers to go get the grain, but he's going to protect Benjamin. He's going to keep Benjamin back. Now this is interesting. Joseph was the son of Rachel, who was Jacob's beloved, favored wife, and that's part of the reason why he favored Joseph. He lost Joseph. He's so torn up by this, and has been for 20 years. The other son of Rachel is Benjamin. And so you can imagine, the text doesn't speak directly to it, but I think indirectly points at this. We're going to see the love and the carefulness he's going to have around Benjamin. He probably has a similar kind of favor toward Benjamin. That this is the son of his beloved wife who has passed away at this point. He's already lost Joseph. He wants to protect Benjamin. And you can imagine, I don't think it's a stretch, that some of the same resentment that those 10 brothers had for Joseph, they would perhaps have similar reasons to have that kind of resentment toward Benjamin. The one who, their father, you 10 go down. If something happens to you, that's all right. But Benjamin must be protected. You can just imagine in their minds, some of those same feelings might still be there. And I think that's going to set up what's going to happen here in a few chapters as it relates to that. But we keep moving on. And so he sends those 10. And the brothers come before Joseph. And it's an interesting scene where they end up sort of bowing down, paying homage to him. It's that dream that he had years ago coming to fruition here. He recognizes them, but they don't recognize him. It's been many years. They haven't seen each other. He was a pretty young man the last time they saw him, so he's changed, probably looks different, more like the way of the Egyptians, speaking a different language. So they don't recognize him, but he recognizes them. And I just wonder, what do you think Joseph is thinking here as they come together and he's looking on this situation he finds himself in? What do you think he's thinking? What would, if you were in his spot, what would you be thinking? What would you want to do in this situation? Greg?
Remember his dreams.
Yeah. Yeah, so probably a faith moment of, wow, that he knew God was with him and giving him some of these dreams, but now you see that.
I think if most of us were being honest, our fault, it pretty easily could be, here's where I get revenge.
Yeah.
I think that's the natural human, that would be the natural human response. After all these years, let me show them.
Yeah, that would for sure be the human response. And we'll look at what Joseph does, and maybe his motivations and what he does can be questioned, and maybe there's multiple levels of why he does what he does, and that's some of why I've kind of questioned this over the years, but we're going to see how God's going to work through what he does, and it's going to be pretty amazing. Right?
So it's just see the ties to his past, but these are the ties that sold him to Egypt and sold him into slavery in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So he's desperate to know what's going on with his family, but his family right before him are unreliable. So he immediately resorts to trickery to try and gain intelligence from them.
Yeah, he probably wants, like I said, wants to know about his family. Probably a part of him wants a little revenge. Probably a part of him is wondering, are you guys the same you were 20 years ago? And he's going to put them to the test as it relates to that. So here's what he...
I think there's a lot of emotion going through here.
Oh, sure.
You know, various levels. He cries, he weeps.
Yeah.
He's trying to, I think he's trying to filter this all through his brain.
Yeah. No doubt. Just a very emotional and a mix of emotions, I'm sure, going on. Here's what he does. The kind of summary of verses 10 through 20 here. So he hides his identity. It says he treats them like strangers in verse 7. He speaks roughly to them, it says in verse 7. He interrogates them, asks questions about who you are, where have you come from, and just all sorts of questions about the family. Part of that, surely, he wants to know what's happening with the family that's his family. Verse 9, he accuses them. He says, you aren't who you say you are. You're spies. You've come to just see what's happening here and spy out this land so you can take advantage of us in some way. And so they're explaining, no, this is who we are. We're 10 brothers. One is no longer. One was left home. Our father is left behind. So he accuses them. And then he imprisons them for 3 days in verse 17. And then, after doing all of this, we can sort of maybe question some of his motivations of this. Is this a little revenge for Joseph to do this? But then we see this process is going to start here, where he's going to test them a little bit here, but in a couple of chapters, he's going to for sure test them. He says to them, the test here is, though he knows the reality of this, he says, prove to me you are who you say you are. Go back and bring this other brother you've spoken of, Benjamin, back with you to prove who you are. And so Joseph binds Simeon. He's going to kind of keep him there, so they have to come back and send them away. And as he sends them away, he's going to set them up, sort of. He's going to put their money back in their sacks. And actually, he won't end up doing anything with this. He won't accuse them as it relates to that. But it's going to cause a lot of anxiety on their parts when they notice it and say, oh, surely we're going to be in trouble if we ever return, or he's going to come after us because of this. And it's interesting, as all this is happening, he's interrogating them, he's speaking roughly to them, he locks them up for 3 days. They're recognizing what's happening here, and they're remembering what happened before, and they're saying, surely this is related to the sin that we committed and have been hiding for these 20 years. Verses 21 through 24 speaks to this. Then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, and that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. And then this is, as was mentioned, one of the situations where Joseph is just overcome with emotion listening to this. But the brothers seem to think that God is at play here, bringing some punishment on them as it relates to this. Are they right to think this? Could God potentially act in a way like that? What are they recognizing here?
I think it's a good study on guilt.
Yeah.
Guilt doesn't leave until you get forgiveness.
Yeah.
They have not gotten forgiveness, and they're just wearing it, and it's wearing on them.
Right. Whether it's God sort of getting back at them a little punishment, as they think, you're right, they haven't dealt with it, and you're going to carry that with you, and that's sort of its own natural way of God sort of poking at us and saying, hey, there's something here. You're not right. Deal with this.
They haven't been honest either.
No. Every day before their father, who is in mourning over this, and they've kept it to themselves all these years. God can sometimes confront us in interesting ways with the reality of our sin. He's starting to do that a bit with them here, it seems. Regardless of what Joseph's motivations in doing this were, I think God's using it to hopefully wake them up a little bit to the reality of their sin. So he sends them back with this grain. Of course, Simeon stays behind. They know the situation of what it's going to take to get him back. They come back to Jacob, and here's what we read in verses 35 through 38. It says, they emptied their sacks. Actually, let me skip down to verse 36. Jacob, their father, said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin? They sort of relayed to him what they're going to have to do to come get Simeon back. All this has come against me. Then Reuben said to his father, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. Jacob is a broken man and mourning over his son Joseph. He said, I could not bear to lose Benjamin now, and have I lost Simeon too. So he refuses. We cannot go back. We've lost what we've lost. I don't want to lose anymore. So we continue on, and we pick up in chapter 43 here. And here's the setup. They've gone through the grain that they brought back. The drought is still happening. They need more. But we know the cost. We remember the cost of what he said. You're going to have to come back with Benjamin. And so he's saying, go get more. They say to him, Father, you know what this is going to take. If you changed your mind, this is the only way, if we take Benjamin, that we're going to be able to go back and confront this man. We already saw Reuben sort of tried to pledge himself and make this promise about his sons, which is kind of strange. I don't know how killing his sons would make anything better. But we're going to see now Judah step up and make a pledge here in verses 8 and 9. And Judah said to Israel, his father, send the boy with me, send Benjamin with me, and we will arise and go that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we had not delayed, we would have now returned twice. So Judah says, put it on me. I will make sure he's taken care of, and if he is not, I will bear the blame for this. And just as a side here, I think it's important that Judah is significant here. Judah is going to be significant just in terms of his tribe, that is going to be the tribe through whom David is going to come, through whom Christ is going to come. And so there's significance to Judah in that sense. But up to this point, really, and we look at all of the brothers, and none of them have really covered themselves in glory. They've been pictured in some pretty awful ways up to this. But Judah certainly is among that. He was complicit, certainly, in Joseph being sold into slavery. Selling him into slavery was actually Judah's idea. Now, I don't want to put that on him too much, because some of the other brothers wanted to kill him, it seems. So maybe he deserves a little bit of a check there of, okay, a little bit better than your brothers. But he was the one who said, let's sell him into slavery. And then we get this picture. We didn't really look at it in detail. Back in chapter 38, right after the beginning of the Joseph story in 37, the story strangely pauses to tell this story about Judah. And it's like, why are we telling this story? I think we're telling the story because Judah plays a significant role in this story as well. And the change that's going to come in the brothers and in Judah. Here's that story, just a quick summary from chapter 38 of Judah. So Judah is apparently fairly old here because he has sons who are old enough to marry. So he's not a super young man. I mean, we think of Joseph being, probably 17, a pretty young man when some of this started. But Judah, it seems, or at least the point of the story, is a good bit older than that. But Judah, his first son, or one of his sons, marries a woman named Tamar. And that son is a wicked man. He's put to death. And so now Tamar is without a husband. The tradition then was you give her to another one of your sons. So he does that. But that son doesn't want to give her a child because it wouldn't really be his child. It would be his brother's child. And their sort of understanding of that culturally. And so he refuses to give her a child. Because of that wickedness, he's put to death as well. And so now Judah's going to say, okay, I have a younger son. When he's old enough, you can marry him. But he doesn't really follow through on that promise. And so Judah, his wife dies as well. And so he's lonely. He goes off to another town. Tamar takes this opportunity. She goes to this town, and she is going to dress up like a cult prostitute and ends up, having sex with Judah and becomes impregnated by Judah. It's just a messy scene, as there are many in the Old Testament. And then she returns back. That they realize she's pregnant, and Judah is just enraged when he finds out about this. And basically, she should be put to death for this great sin that she's done. But she took his staff and to sort of as a pledge before, and she gives it to him and says, "This is the one who impregnated me." And Judah realizes in this moment, what a hypocrite am I. I was ready to stone this woman. I'm no better. But the sin I was ready to stone her for was my sin. And there's another example of how we need to be woken up sometimes to our sin. And so Judah's already shown the levels of his sin, but also has been humbled a little bit in that to this point. The brothers, Judah, it's pictured specifically, are sinful people, and yet God can work through them. God's wanting to work some change and some repentance in them. And so I stop just to say all that Judah has now pledged himself here. This Judah from chapter 38, who shows himself so sinful, has now pledged himself to protect Benjamin. And so Jacob sends them. He says, verse 14, chapter 43, God grant you mercy. If I am bereaved, I am bereaved. Basically, I just got to put my hands up. If I lose more sons and it's more sorrow for me, that's just how it's going to be. So they go back down to Egypt. They approach Joseph, and as he sees them approaching, he sees them, he sends for them, he prepares a meal for them. They're fearful for the money that they had before. That they beg mercy, but they're reassured. Listen, we received your money. Whatever money you had in your sacks when you left, that's a blessing from God. They have this meal with Joseph. They sit down, and they must have just been astounded. He seats them in order of their birth, and then he gives Benjamin this much larger portion. And so he's acting in ways that show his understanding, but they must have been quite confused. But then we get into chapter 44, and this is where things really, really get interesting, where this plan is going to come to fruition here, and this test. They have this meal, they receive their grain, they begin to go back home, but Joseph is going to set them up again, but this time he's going to follow through on it. Verses 1 and 2 of 44 says this, that he commanded the steward of his house, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, that's Benjamin, with his money for the grain. And he did as Joseph told him. So Joseph sends the brothers home, but he slips this cup into Benjamin's bag. And then he's going to have them pursued, and he's going to have them searched. And when they do, it's going to look like that they stole from Joseph, who showed them this great mercy and had this great meal for them. The brothers object to this. We'd never do something like this. Verses 9 through 13, though, here's what we read. He says, whichever of your servants is found with this cup shall die. And we also will be my Lord's servants. I'm sorry. This is the brothers speaking this as they're having this conversation about this. Whichever of your brothers is found with it shall die. And we also will be my Lord's servants. He said, let it be as you say. He who is found with it shall be my servant, and the rest of you shall be innocent. So they're saying, if someone has this, then we'll be your servants. It says, then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. And he searched, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and every man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. This is worst case scenario. The reason our father did not want us to go back, that he might lose another son, especially his favored son Benjamin, and now that this cup has been found in Benjamin's sack, we're going to lose him. Maybe we're all going to find ourselves not able to return, and our father will be even more grieved, and we'll find ourselves in this terrible situation. But here's what Joseph's going to say about it. Only one of you was guilty. So far be it from the rest of you to pay for this. Joseph said to them, verse 15, what deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me can indeed practice divination? And Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also in whose hand the cup has been found. But he, Joseph, said, far be it from me that I should do so. Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, go up in peace to your father. So it's all come together. This is the test, the true test that has been set up to this point. And what it is a repeat of history in a lot of ways. The favored son, previously, they sold the favored son. But because they resented him that he was favored, they thought they would be a lot happier without him around. And so they sell him to then return to their father. Now, the favored son, and they can, when I say sell out the favored son, except this time, they would be a lot more justified if they did it, because as far as they know, Benjamin actually did do this thing. Joseph was innocent. They were just angry at him. They must think Benjamin actually stole this. And so it's similar, but they would be more justified here. But what would it cost? What would it cost if they did not bring Benjamin back? What did it cost last time? Well, it cost something of their souls that they've been eating away at for 20 years and not repenting and keeping their relationship from God being what it should be. But what it cost was their father's joy. And just the mourning and the pain that he's been experiencing for a couple of decades. And they know that if Benjamin were to be lost now, it would be the same thing all over again. So the question is, are they any different? Are their hearts any different than they were 20 years ago? 20 years ago, they did not care about doing this wickedness against their brother. They did not care about the evil and the pain and the suffering that it would bring on their father. They cared nothing for their father. But now, 20 years or so later, are they different? And the answer is going to be yes. That there is some change that has happened here. That as they've sat with this for 20 years, it seemed to have opened their eyes, their hearts to this. They could let Benjamin be taken into slavery and go back, and maybe they would like to get rid of Benjamin in some level, just like they would Joseph. Maybe they resent him in the same ways, but here's what Judah says, verses 30 through 34. Now, therefore, as soon as I come to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die, and your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant our father with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. Judah and the brothers could just do this and they could go home. But Judah intervenes. He says, I cannot bear to think of the pain that this would bring my father. I didn't think or care at all about that 20 years ago, but I've seen what it's done every day for 20 years, and I cannot bear to hate my father the way I did 20 years ago. Imagine the emotion of this. He's doing this. He offers himself in place of Benjamin. This is repentance in this moment. This is a change. What's changed here? It's a beautiful moment. I think it shows change. What do you think of this? What's changed in Judah, if not the other brothers here?
Just real quick, I think it's interesting that Judah lost two sons.
Yeah.
So he knows his father's emotion better than any other possibly.
Yes.
He's the one who's ready to say, just take me, don't let my father go through this. It's kind of a powerful way of showing love and regret.
Yeah. Judah had to experience some pain. Judah had to be humbled. And then they all, just every day, were just surely eaten alive by this. God working on them in some of these ways over the years.
There's an aspect of the maturing process that goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not just going from your teens to your adult years, but that's through the adult years.
Yeah.
We see with Judah in particular, he's gone through some things. He's been tested. He's been disciplined, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And he has matured, not just in years, but I think in spiritual connection. He's gone through a very tough time of trial and has come through it a better person.
Yeah. And probably the only way. Some of the things he experienced that ate at him.
I can't, the speculation is useless, and yet sometimes it's something kind of fun intellectually. Had Judah not gone through what he did with his sons and then his daughter-in-law, and had that not happened, would Judah be willing to step up and take the place?
Yeah.
It was basically a death sentence.
Yeah.
Servant is a very polite word.
Right.
So if this was somebody knowing this could be him offering his life as a substitute for his brother.
Yeah. We can talk a little bit more about some of the big takeaways. Let me try to bring together the rest of this story here. Judah offers himself. At this moment, Joseph, who has been emotional through all of this and has had to go off to cry a couple of times as he's having these interactions with them, has had enough. He responds in verse 3 of chapter 45, and Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. Shocked, dismayed, terrified. I'm sure there are a lot of emotions that are going through the brothers at this moment. He recognizes that in it and makes this statement in verses 5 through 8, and we see kind of a similar statement. And next week we'll see this to kind of summarize some of this of don't worry. Verse 5, do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. Verse 7, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh. That's some deep theology in that. And there'll, I think, probably next week will be some opportunity to think more on that with this statement is made again. But it's an opportunity now to reconcile and to be brought back together. He says to them, bring the family, bring everyone. That's not just 12 people or 12 people in their lives. We're talking about a large group here. And bring everyone and I will provide. They go back to Israel, or back to Jacob/Israel. And he hears the news and he's just, you have to imagine, so joyous over this. He says in verse 28, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. It's like, this is all I need. And actually, he's going to live a good while longer. But he said, this is everything. If I can just see him, I'm ready to die, basically.
It's almost a resurrection scene for Joseph.
Yeah.
He's been dead, and now he's alive. It's really a powerful
Yeah.
transformation of the entire family.
Right.
Well, and also I think Father God would be angry with his other sons.
Yeah.
They have deceived him for many, many years. So it's
Yeah. You would think so. It's interesting. We don't get a picture of that or the interaction related to that. Maybe it happened, or maybe he's just maybe the joy so far outweighs the anger. I'm not sure, but yeah, you would think they've done that for 20 years, that there would be some anger as it relates to that.
It's also possible that something came out with his blessings and curses of his children at the end of his life. Though, I don't know.
It's possible. We will see that. And some of them are good, and some of them we see some negative for what they did. Chapter 46, God assures Jacob, it's fine to do this. It's fine to go down to Egypt. This is part of my plan. You will be blessed there. Please do go. And then at the end of the chapter, reunited, verses 28 through 30, he had, 28 through 30 says, he had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you are still alive. Once again, it's kind of like I'm ready to die now, that this is just such a blessing that he'll actually live much longer. But this emotional reunion of the father and his beloved son. So the family is reunited. Jacob's broken heart is finally healed, and the brothers, in a rare do-over, get some redemption here in this. We've got about 5 minutes left or so, or slightly less than that. What do you take from this? Kind of big takeaways from this story of what we learn, how it encourages or challenges you. What do you think, Karina?
I was just looking, Jacob may have been hesitant to go to Egypt because that was the promised land. Canaan was.
Yes, he was.
I just didn't even think about that. I thought maybe he might be hesitant, like, there might be a trick, I guess, to go see Joseph. But
Right, yeah, it seems to be about the promise. And so God kind of has to, he needed to hear it from God that this is okay. This isn't going against that promise. You will be cared for, your people will return. So yeah, he goes, and it'll be a long time and some trials, but they will return.
that had to take a lot of faith to move from land that was literally promised to you and your dad.
Yeah, for sure.
Jacob might have been thinking of his grandfather Abraham. He also once went into Egypt to escape a famine.
Mm.
And certain things happened there and ultimately resulted in Sarah getting a maidservant Hagar, and that didn't end well.
So maybe that gives them a little reason to go and a little hesitation of going. Let me try to just bring this together. A couple of minutes left. Some takeaways from this. First is this, I think we see through this, and we've hit on this a little bit. God uses discipline to turn us toward repentance. When you think about different ways, that was the case through this. Change, it would be great if we just realized things just on our own. But change often comes through humbling that can sometimes even look like humiliation, as I'm sure Judah was in chapter 38, and pain. And there's pain in this, there's humiliation in this, there's just the everyday bearing the weight of what they've done. And I think God chipped away at them over time as it relates to this. Certainly we think of Judah chipping away at him to get him to the moment where he can step up and do the right thing when it comes to Benjamin here. Repentance comes when we realize the weight of our offense before God, when we humble ourselves, and that can be a long and hard process sometimes, but God worked it out in their life. So just a question for us to think about, how is God trying to wake us up through his discipline? He may be trying to do it right now in our lives in some way. We need to be open to that. Second, this, we see God has mercy for the repentant. We would think the brothers were unforgivable. We would think they were unredeemable, but Joseph had mercy for them. I think God had mercy for them, but what we see pictured here concretely is the mercy that Joseph had for them. And I think it's a great picture of the gospel as the favored son who was treated wrongly has mercy for those who treated him wrongly. That is the gospel of Jesus Christ, our brother and the beloved Son of God, who we have treated as nothing, who on the cross prayed even for those who were killing him. That is the mercy of Christ, and it's pictured here in Joseph. God has mercy for the repentant. And then he offers us a chance at redemption. He can use those with a troubled past. The brothers certainly have one, but he is going to work through this family. He's going to work through the line of Judah in spite of his past to ultimately bring about David, to bring about Christ. God can do some amazing things in quite imperfect people. Then he can turn around people who have been quite disobedient to him in the past. It's an incredible story. And we'll see the end of it next week, with the end of this Genesis story and of this family. But just, I love this section right here and how God was working through it in their lives. Let me pray for us as we end our class, and then we'll have some fellowship time before worship. God, our Father, I thank you for your love and your kindness and all the ways you have blessed us in this life. You are the great creator of all things and the good giver of all gifts. We thank you for this, and we thank you for the mercy of Jesus. And we thank you for the hope of second chances and of transformation and how it's pictured in this story. I pray that we can learn from it, to find some encouragement from it when we feel like we're